You wake up thinking about him again. You imagine his voice, his eyes, his laughter, that strange, impossible pull that never really went away. You tell yourself it's over. You tell yourself you've moved on. But something inside you doesn't listen. Something deeper keeps remembering. This is not obsession. This is not weakness. This is the psyche remembering what the mind denies. Once, you shared a world with him, even if it was brief, even if it was complicated, even if it never made sense to anyone else. The connection felt bigger than you both, didn't it? As if something ancient had recognized itself in him. For a while it was light. You felt seen, alive, awake. You thought, this must be what it means to be chosen. But then it ended, or at least, it seemed to. Words were said, silences stretched, doors closed. Yet inside you, something stayed open. The mind said, forget him. The psyche whispered, not yet. And so you tried to erase him the way people tell you to. You blocked his number, you deleted photos, you distracted yourself with work, new people, new cities. You laughed at your own progress, but the moment you slowed down, there he was again. In a song, a scent, a dream, as if life itself conspired to remind you of what you're trying to bury. You hate it. You feel trapped inside a story that no longer exists. You start to believe that love turned into punishment. But what if it didn't? What if what you're feeling is not punishment, but unfinished meaning? Here is the truth most people never hear. When you connect deeply with someone, you don't just touch minds, you touch unconsciousness. You awaken parts of yourself that were asleep. And when he left, those parts didn't die. They began searching. You're not longing for the man. You're longing for what he carried, a mirror of your own unlived self. That's why you can't stop thinking about him. Because somewhere inside, the story is not between two people anymore. It's between you and your psyche. When you try to cut him out completely, your psyche fights back. It says, no, we still have something to learn. Every memory becomes a messenger. Every dream, a conversation unfinished. You wake up from one of those dreams and feel his presence so vividly, you almost expect him to walk into the room. That's not madness, that's memory of the soul. In the beginning, this feels unbearable. You think of him too much, you feel him in your bones. You don't know where he ends, and you begin. You replay moments that don't deserve that much life, yet they live inside you with color and scent. This is the nightmare phase where love becomes a haunting. But it doesn't stay that way forever, because slowly, if you dare to look deeper, you start to see something extraordinary happening. One day, you remember something about yourself that you had forgotten, a song, a dream, an old ambition. Another day, you realize the pain is smaller, and in its place is understanding. He came into your life as a person, yes, but he stayed as a symbol. Your psyche does not cling to him out of romantic hope. It clings because it is trying to finish a sentence. It is trying to return you to the part of yourself you left behind the day you met him. Look around. Your friends will notice the shift before you do. They'll say, you seem quieter, softer. They'll wonder if you're sad again, but what they're seeing is transformation. You're not just missing him anymore, you're integrating him. You're reclaiming the parts of you he awakened. Your mother might ask if you've forgiven him, and you'll realize forgiveness isn't even the point. The point is that you've made peace with what he represented. Even your body begins to respond differently. You sleep more deeply. The ache in your chest lessens. You start walking through familiar places without flinching at the memory. You feel space opening where there was once a wall, and in that space you begin to return to yourself. Then, one morning, you wake up, and the first thing you feel is not longing, it's gratitude. Gratitude that you once felt something so deep it rearranged you. Gratitude that you survived it. Gratitude that he came and that he left, because both were necessary. Your friends see it. They notice that you don't talk about him with pain anymore. When his name comes up, you smile not to hide, but because the story finally feels complete. The men you meet now sense the difference too. You no longer approach love with fear. You no longer confuse intensity with destiny. You listen to your intuition. You trust your body. You've learned that when the psyche remembers what the mind denies, it's not a curse, it's an awakening. And perhaps one day, When you meet him again by chance, you'll feel that strange calm. You'll look into his eyes and realize you don't need anything from him anymore. Not apology, not explanation, not closure. You'll understand that your connection served its purpose. It brought your unconscious to life. He will feel it too. Maybe he won't say a word, but he'll see it in your eyes, that peace he never gave you. He'll see that you've carried the memory and turned it into wisdom. So no, you're not crazy for still thinking about him. You're not weak for still feeling him somewhere inside. You're healing, slowly, deeply, because what you're really doing is pulling back every projection, every fantasy, every piece of your soul that you once handed to him. And the mind, impatient, logical, terrified of pain, says, enough, move on. But the psyche answers, not yet. There is meaning here. When you honor that process, you stop fighting yourself. You let memory turn into message. You let loss become integration. Picture yourself in the near future. You sit by the window, sunlight on your face. You're not waiting for a text. You're not analyzing dreams. You're just breathing. There's a quiet knowing in you, the kind that doesn't need words. Your friends will see the difference. Your family will see it too. Even the next man you meet will feel it, the depth, the peace, the softness that comes only after the storm. And in that moment, you will understand you were never trying to forget him. You were trying to remember yourself. That's why you couldn't stop thinking about him, because your psyche never forgets what changed it. So stop punishing yourself for remembering. Stop wishing it away. Let the memory live until it has taught you what it came to teach. When the lesson is complete, he will fade not because you forced it, but because you no longer need him to carry your meaning. The psyche remembers what the mind denies. Let it remember, let it finish its work, and then, when it's done, let it rest in peace, in wholeness, in you. You believe you are thinking of him. Yet what moves beneath that thought is not the willful act of remembering, but the secret work of the soul. The mind insists it has forgotten, but the psyche does not obey commands. It moves according to older laws, ancient as myth, where nothing once lived can truly die. The image of him, though banished from speech, remains alive in the underworld of your being. You have mistaken this persistence for weakness, when in truth it is fidelity of another kind. The psyche remembers what consciousness rejects, not to torment but to complete what was left unfinished. For memory, in its deepest form, is not a catalogue of events but a continuation of life itself. That which was meaningful once demands to become whole within you. You speak of time as though it were linear, yet the soul moves in circles. What was yesterday in the world may still be today in the psyche. The hour you shared, the word that once opened your heart, return as echoes because their essence has not yet been absorbed. What you call the past is, for the psyche, the present still breathing through symbols and dreams. The beloved's departure is only outward. Within, his image persists, as if life had carved his outline into the invisible. He lives now, not as man, but as figure, an inhabitant of the imaginal realm, where forms are fluid and meaning still ripens. To the rational mind, this seems madness. To the soul, it is nature itself continuing its conversation. You cannot drive him out by force because you are not his jailer. He belongs to the psyche's kingdom, not the ego's domain. Each time you suppress him, he reappears transfigured in a dream, a song, a sudden ache at dusk. These are not accidents, but the soul's signals, whispering that forgetting is not yet possible because understanding has not yet occurred. When love ends in the outer world, it continues in the inner, seeking closure beyond words. The psyche strives toward completion, not erasure. What torments you as repetition is in truth the circular labor of integration. The image returns until it is seen rightly, until its symbolic truth is known. Then, and only then, does it begin to fade into peace. The haunting is thus a dialogue between two halves of your being, the conscious will that wishes to forget, and the unconscious life that insists on remembrance. Each dream, each sudden vision, is a messenger from that hidden depth saying, "Look again," for only when the image has yielded its meaning can it dissolve back into silence. In this way, what feels like imprisonment is a secret initiation. The one you loved becomes the door through which your psyche leads you to its own interior. The mind believes it is trapped in memory. The soul knows it is being led into meaning. The one you loved was never only himself. He was chosen by your unconscious as the vessel of a secret image long waiting to be seen. What you felt as destiny was the soul's recognition of its own reflection, projected outward into the world. He carried within him the shape of something sacred and forgotten, a figure of the inner masculine that your psyche had not yet met within. You believed you were meeting a man. In truth, you were encountering your own depths. Love at first sight is not merely attraction but revelation, the psyche beholding its own archetypal face in another. That is why it feels eternal, why logic cannot undo it. What you met was the symbolic bearer of your own unlived potential, the bridge between who you are and who you are becoming. Every great passion conceals a secret purpose. It seizes the heart not to bind it to another person, but to awaken the sleeping world within. The beloved stands before you as mirror, yet you mistake the reflection for the source. You fall into the ancient illusion of eros, that another can hold the key to your wholeness. But wholeness is not found through possession. It is discovered through reflection. When he left, the projection did not die. It withdrew inward, seeking its rightful home. The mind calls this longing. The psyche calls it recollection. The image you still see is no longer his. It is yours. It is the anima or animus at work, urging consciousness to claim what was once offered through him. The more you resist, the more vivid he becomes, because the soul will not release its symbols until they are understood. Notice how his image changes when you dream. He appears tender one night, distant the next. Sometimes he speaks wisdom beyond what he ever knew in waking life. These are not memories but messages, shaped by the unconscious, to draw your attention to the symbolic core. What you called him is now a language through which the psyche speaks. You may sense that his presence feels larger than life, imbued with something divine. That is because the archetypal energies of love always carry a touch of eternity. To love deeply is to brush against the infinite, to see the divine disguised in human form. The tragedy comes when the ego believes it can keep what was never personal to begin with. You are not remembering the man. You are remembering the revelation he carried. His face was the mask through which the soul's mystery looked back at you. Once you understand this, longing changes its nature. It ceases to be a craving for reunion and becomes a reverence for the meaning that was born through encounter. To the world, it seems you cannot let go. To the soul, you are in dialogue with a symbol too vast to be dismissed. The psyche will not release what still has something to teach. When the lesson is complete, the image will dissolve like mist at dawn, not because you forced it away, but because you have absorbed its light. The beloved's image, then, is both gift and challenge. It invites you to follow the projection back to its source, to discover the living archetype behind the face. He is no longer a man among men, but a figure of your own inner life, an emissary of the self, bearing the message that love is not between two, but within one, seeking wholeness. When Eros awakens, he does not ask permission. He rises from the depths like a god breaking through the surface of a still lake, flooding the quiet order of the ego with a light too fierce to bear. You call it falling in love, yet in truth it is a seizure, the soul overtaken by its own forgotten divinity. The Greeks called this madness divine. They understood that Eros is not born of reason, but of the ancient fire that binds all opposites together. At first, you mistake this visitation for personal fortune. You believe you have found the one destined to complete you. And for a time, this illusion is necessary, for it draws you into the full experience of the heart. But soon you discover that what possesses you is not the man, but the mystery he evokes. Your longing exceeds his body, his words, his very being. It hungers for something. He only represents the eternal spark hidden within the mortal form. Eros is not sentimental. He does not concern himself with comfort or propriety. He tears the fabric of the known so that the psyche may breathe the air of its own depth. Those who experience him as bliss must later face him as fire. For love that begins as ecstasy must pass through crucifixion before it yields understanding. Every union blessed by Eros carries within it the seed of separation, for the purpose of love is not permanence, but transformation. In the beginning, you feel illuminated. You believe you have been seen for the first time, touched in the secret core of your being. The beloved's gaze seems to pierce centuries of forgetfulness, and you awaken as if from a long sleep. This feeling is not false, it is the psyche's own radiance reflected back to you through another's eyes. But because the ego cannot yet contain this light, it clings to its source, mistaking the mirror for the sun. And then comes the withdrawal. The god departs, and you are left standing amid ruins of divine intoxication. The beloved turns away, and what once felt like paradise becomes absence. Yet, it is in this withdrawal that the true work of Eros begins. The light that once shone through him must now be sought within. If you pursue him outwardly, you chase a shadow. If you turn inward, you follow the flame to its origin. This is why separation feels like death, because it is. The death of illusion, the death of the childlike belief that another can carry the whole of your soul. The pain you feel is not punishment, but initiation. Through it, the psyche draws you into the ancient mystery of love's transformation, the descent from personal desire to impersonal devotion. In this descent, longing changes its nature. What once grasped now begins to behold. To live through this consciously is rare, for most flee the fire. They distract themselves. They scorn the lost love. They bury the memory. But those who endure the fever of Eros come to see that the beloved is both poison and medicine. The same figure that wounds is the one who heals. For he reveals the extent of your own capacity to feel, to suffer, to expand. Love, endured consciously, becomes a vessel of individuation. You sense the vastness of the inner world, but lack the map to navigate it. The ego trembles before forces it cannot command. You may dream of being swept away by waves, of fire consuming a house, of being lost in unfamiliar streets. These are not merely dreams, they are mythic enactments of what is happening within. The old form of life burns away to make room for a wider consciousness. The gods demand sacrifice, and Eros is no exception. He takes the offering of your certainty, your pride, your control. He leaves you vulnerable, stripped of the defenses that once kept the unconscious at bay. Yet in this nakedness, you begin to sense the contours of the real, the self behind the persona. The heart, broken open, becomes a chalice for the divine. What felt like loss now reveals itself as initiation into the mystery of being alive. Do not think that love's disappearance means its end. What has touched eternity cannot vanish. It changes form. Eros continues his work beneath awareness, shaping dreams, guiding choices, leading you unknowingly toward integration. He is the alchemist within, turning the lead of attachment into the gold of understanding. Each tear shed in longing is part of that transmutation. In moments of quiet, when the ache softens, you may sense his presence again, not as obsession, but as still warmth. It is no longer his voice you hear, but the echo of your own soul speaking back to you through the silence. You begin to see that love was never about possession, but participation in the eternal rhythm of creation and dissolution. If you can bear this truth, Eros becomes your ally rather than your tormentor. He teaches you that love's purpose is not to complete, but to reveal. Every separation, every disappointment is a turning of the wheel toward greater consciousness. You do not lose love by letting go. You free it from form, allowing it to return as wisdom. Those who have been possessed by Eros and survived his fire carry a certain radiance. They know something of the divine that others only suspect. Their eyes hold both sorrow and serenity, for they have seen how beauty and pain are twin aspects of the same God. They have learned that to love deeply is to consent to be changed beyond recognition. In the quiet after the storm, you stand as one who has crossed a threshold. The mind still remembers the man, but the soul knows it has encountered an archetype. The fire of Eros has burned through the illusion of separation, leaving behind not emptiness but space, space in which something larger than love may take root. This is the paradox. Eros begins by binding, but his ultimate gift is freedom. You thought he came to unite you with another. In truth, he came to unite you with yourself. When the God of love withdraws his radiance, he leaves behind a cavern. You awaken to absence, and into that absence rushes the shadow, the unseen half of your own nature. The same fire that once illuminated beauty now throws its light upon what has been concealed. The warmth of Eros turns cold, and you begin to see yourself not as heroine of love, but as creature of longing, envy, resentment, and shame. What was ideal becomes grotesque. The soul begins its night journey. At first you resist. You say, "This is not me. I am kind, faithful, capable of forgiveness." But beneath these affirmations, the rejected parts of your being stir restlessly, demanding recognition. The beloved's withdrawal exposes them, for every passion is twin-born. Where there is love, there hides its opposite. The more you adored, the deeper your rage. The more you trusted, the more profound your fear of betrayal. The shadow is the soul's way of restoring balance, and its arrival marks the beginning of true transformation. In the glow of romance, you projected your light upon the beloved. Now that he is gone, you project the darkness. You call him selfish, cowardly, cruel, but these accusations, though sometimes justified outwardly, are also mirrors. They reveal what the ego refuses to see within itself. The intensity of hatred equals the degree of disowned passion. To see this without despair is the beginning of wisdom. When you find yourself haunted by bitterness, unable to forgive, or tempted to prove your worth, you are confronting the shadow directly. It does not appear as a moral adversary, but as a forgotten aspect of the soul that longs to return home. The task is not to destroy it, but to integrate it, to stand before your own rage, jealousy, and wounded pride and say, "You too belong to me." The alchemist called this work solutio, dissolving the rigid boundaries that divide the heart against itself. You may notice dreams now turning darker labyrinths, storms, faces distorted, descending stairways. These are not punishments, but portrayals of the psyche's descent into its depths. Each dream presents an image of what must be faced: the inner aggressor, the abandoned child, the false self, built from the need to be loved. When you approach these figures with courage rather than denial, they begin to speak. They tell you their stories, how they were cast out when you first learned to be pleasing, how they took refuge in the shadows of your relationships, waiting for acknowledgement. There will be nights when the weight of these revelations feels unbearable. You will want to escape into distraction, into blame, into another's arms. But every evasion merely delays the work. The shadow cannot be buried again. It is too alive. It must be lived with, studied, befriended. This companionship with one's darkness is the essence of depth psychology, the willingness to endure ambiguity, to see oneself as both angel and animal, saint and sinner, light and abyss. To the rational mind, this descent appears as regression. But the psyche knows better. Just as the seed must rot in darkness to break open, the personality must decompose before new life can emerge. This is the nigredo, the blackening, the sacred melancholy of the alchemist. Here the opposites collide: love and hate, joy and despair, self and other. What feels like dissolution is in fact the creation of new psychic substance. The soul ferments in its own contradictions until it produces a light that is not borrowed from the beloved but born within. It is in this phase that many turn bitter, denying love altogether. They confuse awakening with cynicism and call their wound wisdom. But this is merely another disguise of the shadow, the pride of the injured heart. True healing demands humility, to see that you too were driven by need, by projection, by fear of your own depths, to admit that you loved not only the man but also the image of yourself reflected in his eyes. Without this confession, the soul cannot mature. It remains trapped in the mirror. The descent continues until the ego yields its superiority. The cry, "Why did he do this to me?" becomes, "What within me sought this experience?" This turning of the question marks the birth of self-knowledge. You begin to see that the beloved was not sent to bless or punish, but to reveal the unintegrated parts of your being. He carried both your light and your darkness, and through him you have met yourself more completely than ever before. At the heart of the shadow lies gold, the unlived life, the creative energy bound by repression. When you cease to fight the darkness, its energy returns as vitality. The anger that once consumed you becomes assertiveness, the envy becomes admiration, the pain becomes minus the same, compassion. The psyche wastes nothing. Even the most destructive impulses contain within them the seeds of transformation once consciousness brings them to light. In solitude, you may begin to sense this shift. The ache softens, and in its place comes a strange curiosity. You start asking different questions. Not how could he leave, but what in me still fears abandonment. Not why did I love him, but what part of my soul did he represent? Each inquiry draws a fragment of shadow into awareness, transforming poison into medicine. The shadow is not an enemy of love, it is its completion. Only by descending into darkness can love become whole. Without this descent, passion remains idealized, brittle, and doomed to repeat itself. But when the shadow is faced and integrated, love becomes compassionate, discerning, and free. You no longer seek salvation through another, because you have found divinity in your own depths. From this integration arises a new humility, a knowledge that every human carries both light and darkness. You begin to see the beloved with greater clarity, not as angel or devil, but as fellow traveler caught in the same struggle. Forgiveness then ceases to be a moral act and becomes recognition of shared humanity. The heart that can hold both pain and understanding becomes vast enough to love without possession. In time, the shadow's voice grows quieter. It no longer demands attention through pain, but speaks gently as intuition, as a sense of truth. The darkness has not vanished. It has been accepted. The psyche stands more balanced, the ego tempered like iron by fire. You realize that you are no longer the same person who once clung to love as salvation. You have been initiated into the secret of the opposites, that wholeness is not the victory of light over dark, but their eternal conversation. And so, when you next feel the familiar ache, the sudden memory, the fleeting anger, you need not resist it. These are the last echoes of the underworld, reminding you of where you have traveled and what you have reclaimed. The descent has given you a new kind of strength, not the strength of defense, but of depth. You can now stand before your own soul unafraid. The mind still names him as the cause, but the heart knows he was only the catalyst. Through his leaving, the hidden life of your psyche has been revealed. You have descended, faced the shadow, and found within its darkness the first glimmer of your own light. When waking life becomes unbearable, the psyche turns inward and begins to speak in its oldest tongue, the language of dreams. What reason refuses to hear, the unconscious repeats each night in symbol, image, and paradox. While the mind struggles to explain or suppress, the dream carries on its quiet labor of truth-telling. It gathers fragments scattered by daylight and arranges them in mysterious forms so that the soul might look upon its own condition without resistance. The dreams that come after love's departure are rarely peaceful. They are charged with the residue of longing and unfinished conversation. Sometimes he appears as he once was, smiling, indifferent, tender. Sometimes he changes shape, a traveler at the door, a stranger whose eyes you know. The psyche reanimates his image to continue the dialogue that waking life interrupted. When you dream of him, do not rush to interpret too quickly. The dream is not a puzzle to be solved, but a visitation to be honored. Sit quietly and recall the feeling that lingered upon waking, not just the content, but the mood. Was it sorrow, guilt, tenderness, fear? That feeling is the key, for emotion is the bridge between the conscious mind and the unconscious meaning. The dream uses the language of feeling when words are too narrow to contain its message. Perhaps you dream that you are speaking with him again, but his answers make no sense. This confusion is deliberate. The psyche shows you that communication at this level is symbolic, not literal. Or perhaps he turns away without listening, reflecting your own inability to hear what the soul is asking. Each gesture, each silence is a metaphor. The dream stage is the theater of the psyche, where forgotten truths act themselves out in disguise. In the old mysteries, dreams were oracles, the gods' way of advising those who could not yet think symbolically. We moderns have dismissed them as nonsense, yet they continue their work unperturbed. They bring up from the deep what our civilization has forgotten, that the soul speaks through images long before it learns the language of reason. The dream is older than the mind. It is the inheritance of all humanity, the echo of countless lives lived before yours. Sometimes a dream will seem prophetic. You may see his face before hearing from him again, or feel the scent of a place you have never been. These moments are not miracles in the religious sense, but expressions of the unity of the psyche, what I have called synchronicity. The inner and outer worlds mirror each other when meaning is ripe. The dream simply unveils the pattern already forming beneath events. You may notice recurring symbols: water, houses, paths, fire. Water is the unconscious itself, the sea of psychic life. To enter it is to surrender control, to risk transformation. The house is the structure of your being. Its rooms represent layers of the soul. To find a locked door is to encounter repression. To discover a forgotten attic is to stumble upon memory. Paths reveal your direction, fire your passion or purification. Each image evolves as you do. Record your dreams without judgment. Over time, you will see a sequence unfolding, as though the psyche were writing its own gospel of redemption. At first, the beloved dominates. Later, he recedes, replaced by other figures, a wise guide, a child, an unknown woman or man. These are aspects of your own inner world, emerging as the projection upon him dissolves. The dream begins to reassign his qualities back to their rightful owner, you. Notice when he changes in tone. In early dreams, his presence may wound you anew. In later ones, he appears serene or distant or silently approving. This evolution mirrors the integration of his image. The psyche uses him until the lesson is learned, then transforms him into a symbol of the self, the totality striving for consciousness. When you dream of reconciling with him peacefully, it is not a sign that he will return, but that the opposites within you have begun to reconcile. There will also be dreams of pursuit and avoidance. You run after him through streets that shift and melt, or he calls from afar while you cannot reach him. These are enactments of the psychic tension between the ego, which seeks reunion, and the unconscious, which insists on independence. Each chase and each failure to catch him is a symbolic rehearsal of letting go. The dream repeats this motif until the energy once bound to him flows freely within your own system again. Occasionally, a dream will bring terror. You see him dying, or you yourself descend into darkness. These are moments when the unconscious stages the death of the old attachment. Do not fear these dreams. They are the rituals of psyche, the funerals it conducts for the images that have completed their work. Through them, the soul releases what the mind cannot. Mourning in dreams is gentler than mourning in waking life. It allows the death of the past without the paralysis of despair. Dreams often come with companions, animals, landscapes, unknown presences. A bird may guide you across a river, a serpent may speak wisdom, a child may take your hand. Each is a fragment of your wholeness, an emissary of transformation. The more you attend to them, the more coherent their story becomes. You will begin to see that the psyche is orchestrating a slow, narrative one that begins in separation but ends in integration. In this narrative, the beloved's image gradually merges with other symbols: the sun, the flame, the mirror, the sea. He becomes less a person and more a force of nature, an expression of the archetype of renewal. When this happens, your waking thoughts of him also begin to change. You feel the old longing recede, replaced by quiet reverence. You understand that he was not taken from you. He was absorbed into the life of your soul. There will be dreams of reconciliation, not romantic but spiritual. You and he may sit together, not speaking, while light fills the room. You awaken with peace rather than pain. This is the psyche's way of closing the circle, of giving form to what consciousness has resisted. The dream accomplishes what reality could not: completion. Through all these visions, the unconscious performs its art of compensation. What the day denies, the night restores. When the ego insists on control, the dream reintroduces wonder. When memory wounds, the dream offers healing imagery. If you accept these nocturnal communications, they become allies rather than torments. You begin to sense that you are not alone in your suffering. Something within you, wise, ancient, compassionate, is guiding the process. Eventually, the dreams change character. They become clearer, less chaotic, suffused with light. The beloved appears less often, or as part of a wider symbolic pattern. Sometimes he is present only as a voice, or as an invisible companion whose presence you feel but need not see. The psyche is signaling that his role as intermediary is ending. The energy once bound to his image now serves the greater dialogue between your conscious life and the self. Dreams do not cease, they evolve. Even when he vanishes entirely, the dream continues its work, revealing new facets of your being. What began as the story of love and loss becomes the story of awakening. You realize that the unconscious never intended to return you to him, but to return you to yourself. Thus, the dream is not memory, but metamorphosis. It transforms emotion into meaning, attachment into understanding, and the personal into the archetypal. Each night, it builds within you a secret architecture of wholeness, brick by brick, image by image, until one morning you awaken and find that the house of your being has changed. Light falls differently through its windows, air moves freely through its rooms. You stand in the same world, yet it feels larger, alive with unseen presence. The dream, faithful messenger of the psyche, has accomplished its purpose. It has translated pain into symbol, symbol into insight, and insight into renewal. You no longer fear the night, for you have learned that it speaks in the language of your own becoming. After the descent and the dreams comes the slow fire. It burns not in passion but in transformation. What was once called loss is now revealed as a sacred experiment. The alchemists named it separatio, the division of substance so that its essence may be revealed. To the uninitiated, it appears as desolation. To the soul, it is the furnace of rebirth. Here, every memory becomes material for the work, every tear a drop of the dissolving tincture through which new life will be born. The separation you mourn is not punishment, but purification. The psyche performs its alchemy in secrecy, turning what is human grief into spiritual gold. The beloved, once an external flame, becomes internal fire, the agent of refinement. Just as the alchemist heated his matter until the coarse dissolved and the pure emerged, so your soul endures its heat until the false melts away. The heart's crucible is loneliness, the flame is reflection. You may feel as though you are dissolving, losing boundaries, identity, meaning, yet this dissolution is necessary. In the language of alchemy, this is the nigredo's continuation, where all form decays so that spirit may be released. Each memory that returns the moment of tenderness, the quarrel, the silence must be subjected to this inner heat. It must be seen not with nostalgia or bitterness, but with the patient gaze of one observing transformation. The psyche, like nature, wastes nothing. What once belonged to love is now reclaimed by the soul as energy for consciousness. You begin to see that every attachment contained within it the seed of awakening. The same intensity that bound you to him now fuels your creative and spiritual life. He no longer serves as object but as element, the mercurial principle that unites opposites within you. In the alchemical vessel, everything must interact, sulfur of passion with mercury of imagination, salt of endurance with the water of tears. The work is delicate. If you repress the fire, it stagnates. If you feed it with obsession, it consumes. You must tend it with awareness, allowing grief to burn cleanly without collapsing into despair. The aim is not to extinguish feeling, but to transmute it into light. Slowly, the blackness lightens. This is the albedo, the whitening. After darkness, a strange clarity appears. You begin to see your story not as tragedy, but as necessity. The beloved's departure becomes intelligible, a movement of the psyche toward integration. The images that once tormented you now appear luminous, purified of personal sting. In them you perceive archetypal form, the eternal drama of union, loss, and renewal. You may dream now of washing, of dawn, of clear water running through ruined places. These are the signs of purification. The unconscious is rinsing away the residues of attachment, preparing the ground for the next stage. The alchemists spoke of this as the baptism of the soul, where the matter once darkened by grief begins to reflect the light of spirit. The psyche is teaching you that cleansing does not come from forgetting, but from understanding. This understanding is not intellectual. It rises slowly, like warmth after a storm. You find yourself thinking of him without pain, even with tenderness. You no longer need to defend or condemn. You sense that each of you served a greater design. He as the awakener, you as the vessel of transformation. Gratitude begins to replace grievance, and the wound begins to close. The final phase of alchemy is the rubedo, the reddening, the return of life and passion, but now transfigured. The heart, tempered by fire and washed by water, regains its color. Desire returns, but not as possession. It is now a quiet flame, rooted in the self rather than projected outward. You feel love not as craving, but as radiance. What was once directed at him now flows freely toward existence itself. In this stage, the psyche reveals the unity beneath all opposites. The beloved and the loss, the joy and the pain, the meeting and the parting, all are recognized as aspects of the same process of becoming. The alchemist called this the conjunctio oppositorum, the union of opposites, symbolized by the marriage of sun and moon. Within you, the inner masculine and feminine, once split by projection, now embrace in silent accord. Outwardly, nothing seems to have changed. You rise, you work, you move through familiar streets, but inwardly a new order governs your being. The inner dialogue has replaced the old dependence. You no longer seek confirmation from another's gaze. The self has become your witness, your companion, your beloved, and yet the memory of him does not vanish. It remains as a sacred residue, like gold dust in the vessel after the philosopher's stone is formed. You understand now that forgetting is not erasure, but transformation. He lives within you as symbol, not as wound. The psyche has accomplished what the alchemists dreamed of. It has turned lead into gold, separation into understanding, longing into wisdom. When you walk beneath the evening sky, you feel the quiet companionship of the universe. The stars no longer accuse you of loss, they speak of continuity. You realize that you are part of a vast process of creation that uses love and pain alike as instruments of awakening. The beloved was never outside this process. He was its messenger. Through him, the unconscious drew you toward your own depth. Thus ends the alchemy of separation, not with forgetting, but with illumination. The heart has been refined, the mind humbled, the soul expanded. You have discovered that the true union was never with him, but with the life within you that his presence revealed. The work is not over. It never is, but it has changed its quality. The fire now burns quietly, sustaining rather than consuming. You are no longer the one who began this journey. The person who once sought love as completion has been transmuted into the one who loves as expression. Separation has become the crucible in which you were made whole. At the end of every alchemical process, when the matter has been purified and the vessel cooled, the alchemist looks into the crucible and beholds his own face reflected in the gold. So too, after the long work of separation, you begin to see yourself mirrored in all that has happened. The beloved who once carried your soul's projection has faded, and in his place stands something quieter, vaster, nearer than breath, your own image transfigured by experience. This is not the self of vanity, but the self, the inner totality that has waited behind every illusion of love. In the beginning, you sought the beloved to find meaning. Now you discover that meaning has always been within. The energy that once reached outward in yearning returns to its source. You realize that every glance, every touch, every moment of passion was the psyche's way of showing you what you are capable of being. The mirror that once reflected his face now reveals the features of your own soul. The search for him has become the search for yourself. This turning inward is not withdrawal, it is revelation. You begin to see that all relationships are mirrors of the self's dialogue with consciousness. Each person we love becomes a reflection of a part of us waiting for recognition. The more we understand this, the less we cling to individuals as saviors. Love becomes less about possession and more about participation, the shared unfolding of the divine within two beings who meet for a time under its spell. At first, this realization may bring loneliness, for the ego mourns its old drama. The intensity of pursuit, the ecstasy of union, the anguish of loss, these were the colors by which you once defined life. Now, as they fade, existence feels pale and still. But wait, beneath that stillness, a deeper rhythm begins to sound. It is the heartbeat of the self, steady, impersonal, vast. It does not demand, it simply is. To attune to this rhythm is to taste peace. You may notice new forms of creativity emerging. The energy that once animated fantasy now flows into art, reflection, or service. The psyche, freed from the orbit of obsession, redirects its eros toward creation. You find yourself writing, painting, walking alone by water, listening to the voice within that whispers not of longing but of life. This is how the self expresses itself once the projections have been withdrawn. Its voice is gentle but inexhaustible. Sometimes, while alone, you may feel his presence not as ghost or memory but as essence. You understand that he is part of you now, an inner companion rather than an external figure. The qualities you once admired in him, courage, tenderness, clarity, awaken as living possibilities within your own nature. What you once tried to receive from him, you now embody. The polarity has dissolved. The masculine and feminine within you begin to converse instead of compete. The self, unlike the ego, does not divide experience into success and failure, gain and loss. It views all opposites as necessary, halves of one greater pattern. When you live from this center, you begin to perceive meaning in every circumstance. The mind still remembers its pain, but the heart holds no grievance. You see that everything which once seemed random was guided by a subtle intelligence, the same intelligence that arranges dreams and seasons. In this awareness, compassion is born. You no longer judge the past self that loved too blindly or suffered too long. You see that she did exactly what the psyche required. She endured the fire so that something eternal might take shape. The self does not condemn weakness. It uses it as a doorway to depth. Every mistake, every heartbreak becomes part of the sacred geometry of your unfolding. Now you begin to sense the presence of an inner guide, a voice or intuition that speaks from a place deeper than thought. It is calm, patient, often silent, but unmistakable. This is the self communicating through what the mystics called gnosis, direct knowing. It tells you less what to do than how to be, attentive, receptive, aligned. The more you trust it, the less you need outer confirmation. Where once you asked, "Does he still think of me?" you now ask, "What is the truth of my own heart in this moment?" The self's reflection reveals also the limits of the ego. You see how much of your suffering came not from love itself, but from identification with desire, with pride, with fear of abandonment. These were necessary illusions, for they gave shape to the learning. But now, like the scaffolding around a completed temple, they can be dismantled. You do not destroy the ego, you place it in service to the larger whole. At times, the world around you mirrors this inner shift. People respond differently, situations unfold with less friction. You attract what resonates with your new state, for the psyche and world are not separate, they are two sides of one fabric. Synchronicities occur, small signs that your outer life is beginning to reflect the harmony within. It is as if the universe recognizes your new frequency and arranges itself accordingly. In moments of contemplation, you may sense that the self is not merely within you, but also beyond you, the living order of existence itself. The distinction between inner and outer, self and other, begins to blur. You realize that the love you once felt for him was an echo of the love that moves the stars, the same current that breathes through all beings. Personal love was its doorway. Now you step into its vastness. Yet the self demands humility. To live from its center is not to become grand, but simple. You find joy in small things, patience in uncertainty, gratitude even in solitude. You no longer need dramatic signs of destiny, because meaning has become immanent in every gesture, every breath. What once felt like an unbearable emptiness has become fullness. And if by chance his name crosses your mind, it no longer stirs turmoil. It floats through you like a leaf upon water, part of the current, but no longer the source. You realize that nothing truly ends. All experiences continue within the continuum of the self, transformed but not erased. The man was a chapter, but the book is your own becoming, and it is still being written by the hand of the unseen author within. The self in reflection is not an arrival, but a beginning. For now that you have glimpsed your wholeness, life will invite you to live it not in retreat from the world, but in it. Love will return, as it always does, but you will meet it differently. You will not ask it to save you. You will greet it as equal, companion, mirror, flame. For you have learned that all mirrors point back to the same source, the self, the one who has been with you all along. When the reflection of the self becomes clear, the soul begins its final task, to weave meaning from all that has been lived. Meaning is the psyche's highest nourishment. Without it, suffering decays into bitterness. With it, pain ripens into wisdom. The mind, impatient and literal, seeks explanations. The soul seeks pattern, the invisible symmetry by which all contradictions are reconciled. To find meaning is not to solve the mystery, but to stand in reverent understanding before it. In this stage, memories no longer demand judgment. They cease to divide into good or bad, fortunate or cruel. You begin to see them as movements in a single dance, each step necessary for the choreography of the soul. The beloved's arrival and departure, your hope and despair, your awakening and descent, all belong to the same pattern of transformation. They are the alternating currents of the same divine electricity, without which consciousness would never have been born. Meaning does not descend from above, it rises from within the lived experience. As you recall the story of your love, the pain that once seemed senseless begins to reveal its purpose. The intensity of longing taught you to feel, the loss taught you to see, the descent taught you to endure. Through him, life initiated you into the mystery of relationship, not merely with another, but between ego and soul, matter and spirit, human and divine. What you called heartbreak was the breaking of the shell that kept your inner world asleep. Gratitude now takes the place of lamentation. You no longer wish to undo what happened. You sense that the psyche does not err. It moves according to laws subtler than morality. Every encounter, even those marked by pain, serves the evolution of consciousness. You see that he came not to complete you nor to ruin you, but to awaken you to your own depth. He was both messenger and mirror, carrying a fragment of your destiny. As the fragments of memory settle into coherence, your inner life gains new order. The opposites that once tore you apart, love and loss, light and dark, masculine and feminine, begin to converse instead of fight. This dialogue produces a harmony that is not sentimental, but truthful. The psyche, like the cosmos, seeks equilibrium, not perfection. You learn that peace is not the absence of tension, but the capacity to hold it within a larger meaning. Sometimes this meaning reveals itself in images. You may dream of a mandala, or find yourself drawn to circular forms, the moon, a bowl, the horizon. These are symbols of totality, showing that the soul has gathered its scattered parts into one pattern. What was once chaos now appears as ordered wholeness. The circle is the psyche's signature of completion. It tells you that the story has found its center. In waking life, signs of this integration appear quietly. You move through places that once wounded you and feel no disturbance. You hear his name and no longer contract. You feel a calm curiosity about his path, a genuine wish that he has found peace. These are not gestures of virtue, but evidence that your own soul has reconciled the past. Forgiveness happens not by decision, but by evolution. It is the natural outcome of understanding. You begin to perceive love in a new light. It is no longer a force that binds two individuals. It is an energy that connects all life. The personal story becomes a doorway into the universal. You recognize that every heart that has ever loved, suffered, and awakened has traced this same path. Your own pain becomes part of humanity's long labor toward consciousness. This recognition ends isolation. You no longer ask, why me? But how am I being used by life to know itself? The integration of meaning also transforms your relationship to time. The past ceases to imprison you. It becomes a field of symbols from which you draw strength. The future no longer appears as threat or promise, but as continuation of an eternal unfolding. You stand in the present as one stands in the center of a great wheel, watching its spokes turn, yet feeling the stillness at its hub. This stillness is the self, unmoved, timeless, aware. Now, even the smallest events carry resonance. A leaf falling, a child's laughter, the evening light all seem to participate in your story. The world speaks symbolically again, as it did when you were first in love, but now without illusion. You understand that reality itself is woven of meaning, and you are both its observer and participant. What was once projected onto the beloved has returned to the cosmos. You no longer worship a person, you revere life itself. And yet, meaning is not static, it deepens as you live it. The psyche will continue to bring new symbols, new experiences, each demanding to be integrated. You have not arrived at enlightenment, but at balance, the poised awareness that allows life to unfold without defense. When suffering comes again, you will know how to meet it, not as enemy, but as alchemical material. You will recognize the pattern and say, "This too belongs to the work." In this way, meaning becomes your faith, not belief in doctrine, but trust in process. You no longer need to control outcomes or predict the future, for you sense that life is trustworthy in its depths. This quiet trust is the gold the alchemists sought, the incorruptible substance that remains after every fire. It is the consciousness that sees purpose in all things, even in endings. When you look back now, you can trace the entire arc of transformation. The haunting, the shadow, the dreams, the separation, the reflection, each stage prepared the next, like movements in a symphony. What began as obsession has become understanding. What began as loss has become expansion. You see that the psyche remembered what the mind denied, so that life could reveal its wholeness through you. The pain was never meaningless. It was meaning being born, and so the soul rests, not in forgetting, but in knowing. The story of love has turned into the story of consciousness, a tale as old as time, told once more through your life. The beloved has served his purpose. You have integrated his image into the great pattern, and in doing so, you have learned the secret the mystics whispered, that every love is a step toward the divine, and that to remember rightly is to awaken. At the end of the journey, when the psyche has spoken through shadow, dream, and transformation, there comes a stillness unlike any silence you have known. It is not the void of despair, but the fullness that remains after the storm. The self has completed its work for this cycle. It no longer presses through symptom or longing, it simply is. The image of the beloved, once bright and tormenting, now lies folded in the heart like a page in a sacred book, preserved, understood, but no longer read each day. The soul remembers, but without ache. Peace does not arrive as triumph. It enters quietly, as a dawn without spectacle. You awaken one morning and notice that the air itself feels gentle. The body no longer holds tension as before. Breath moves easily, as if the chest had finally forgiven itself for holding so long. This is the body's way of saying that the psyche's labor is complete. The ache that once lived behind the ribs has become space open, resonant, alive. Now, memory behaves differently. It does not seize or pull. It drifts like music heard from a distant room. The man who once filled your thoughts appears as a figure in an old painting, still beautiful, but belonging to another time. You can look at him without desire or defense, because you see through him to what he symbolized, the awakening of the self through the mirror of love. The psyche keeps what was real, the meaning, and releases the rest into time's current. You may meet him again by chance. You will not tremble as before. The soul, having integrated the image, no longer seeks possession or validation. You may feel a quiet warmth, the echo of what once was, but it will not disturb your equilibrium. His presence will remind you not of loss, but of distance traveled. You will see that love, once so consuming, has fulfilled its purpose by returning you to your own center. What was between two has become one. Peace of the self is not indifference. It is love purified of demand. You wish him well, not because morality instructs you to, but because you feel no separation. The same life that moves through you moves through him. What was once a private drama now reveals itself as universal rhythm, meeting, parting, evolving. You understand that all souls participate in this rhythm. Each connection is a note in the great composition of becoming. At times, you may sense traces of the old feeling, a sudden nostalgia, a brief tenderness. Do not mistake this for regression. It is the psyche's way of honoring what once was. The heart remembers as the earth remembers rain, not to call it back, but to remain fertile. Such moments are signs of integration, not relapse. They remind you that nothing living is ever lost. All that has touched the soul remains within its pattern. The peace of the self also brings clarity. You can now look upon your past without distortion. You see your own mistakes without shame, his without resentment. What seemed like failure was simply the psyche's method of progression. This recognition frees you from the tyranny of if only. The story could not have unfolded otherwise, because it was never merely yours to direct. In solitude, you no longer feel abandoned but accompanied. The silence that once frightened you now feels like presence. You perceive an unseen companion, the self walking beside you, guiding without words. This companionship is subtle yet immense. It does not flatter or console, but it sustains. You begin to experience what the mystics called unum mysterium, the quiet union between the human and the eternal. The boundaries between inner and outer dissolve. Life feels intimate, as if the world itself breathes with you. There are moments of sudden illumination. Standing at the window, watching sunlight fall on an ordinary street, you feel a still joy that has no cause. This joy does not depend on memory or hope. It arises from being itself. It is the self's signature, the knowledge that existence, even in its imperfection, is sufficient. The same force that once expressed itself through longing now manifests as serenity. The fire has not gone out. It has become light. From this place, love changes its direction. It no longer reaches outward for completion. It radiates. You find yourself loving without object the sky, the passing faces, the brief kindness of strangers. Eros, once bound to a person. The energy that once burned you now illumines. Compassion replaces passion, not as lesser flame, but as wider one. You feel connected to all who suffer as you did, and you wish them the same release. The peace of the self is active, not stagnant. It does not withdraw from the world. It moves through it with quiet purpose. You act without strain, speak without excess, give without calculation. The ego no longer demands to be seen or vindicated. Its energy serves a larger rhythm, the creative unfolding of life itself. What once was chaos now feels orchestrated. You no longer struggle to make meaning, you live it. Dreams, too, change character. They are no longer haunted by pursuit or loss. Instead, they present symbols of wholeness, the circle, the temple, the child, the psyche, having achieved balance, now reflects continuity. The dream world becomes luminous, benevolent, sometimes playful. You understand that even sleep participates in peace. The unconscious, once turbulent, now collaborates with consciousness rather than opposing it. When you encounter new love, you meet it without illusion. You no longer confuse intensity with destiny, longing with truth. You enter relationship as one who has known the labyrinth and carries its map. You do not seek to merge or to save, but to experience the mystery of two consciousnesses meeting in freedom. If love ends, you know it will hurt, but you also know that pain is not the enemy. You have learned its secret purpose, to refine, to reveal, to return. The world around you reflects this change. People sense peace before you speak it. The same friends who once worried now remark upon your calm. They ask what you did to heal, but you cannot explain, for healing is not a method but a metamorphosis. It happened in silence, in dreams, in the patient labor of the psyche. It is not an achievement but a grace that followed understanding. In quiet hours, you might feel gratitude so profound it borders on reverence. You thank the life that tore you open, the love that broke you, the loneliness that taught you to listen. You understand now why the psyche remembers what the mind denies, because the soul's evolution depends upon experience fully lived, fully integrated. Forgetting would have been easier, but it would have left you shallow. Remembering has made you whole. The peace of the self is not a final state. It is the rhythm of an awakened life. You will continue to change, to lose, to love again, but you will not forget what was learned in the descent, that everything returns to meaning when seen through the eyes of the soul. Suffering, once feared, becomes initiation. Endings become openings. You carry within you now an unshakable center, the point of stillness around which the wheel of experience turns. When at last you look back on this chapter, you will see it not as tragedy but as initiation. The one you called him was the threshold through which your own self entered awareness. Without him, the psyche might have slept longer in its illusions. Through him, it awakened, and though his image may fade, his role remains eternal. He was the bearer of your transformation. Now, you understand, love was never meant to last as possession, but to reveal the eternal within the fleeting. The psyche remembers what the mind denies because the soul's covenant with life is to evolve. Once remembrance has done its work, peace follows not as forgetfulness, but as knowing. And so the journey ends where it began, with a thought of him, yet now it comes like a blessing, not a wound. You smile not for him, but for the life that used him to bring you home. The psyche remembers, the mind understands, and together they rest. The work is complete, for now, and in that quiet, infinite pause, you hear what was always speaking beneath the noise of thought, the peace of the self, the soul remembering itself whole.